Hello, I'm Paddy Kelly. I'm really happy to be here celebrating the start of my 80s. Join me and Marion Shanley as we take an adventure through my journey so far. And it doesn't stop here. There's lots more to come, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. So, Paddy, we're after taking an adventure already at the start of your life, in the middle section. And then we have another part that's really important. I want to talk about some of the really key moments in your world when it came to development and the world that you embraced from a very early age with your family, but developed into a business. So there's one part that I love. There's a story behind everything that you have done and achieved. And Castlecourt comes up. So I think that's something we should talk about.
Yes, I remember seeing it for the first time. A man called Ottewell, Ernest Ottewell. He had the land, had roads were in, plans were agreed, and in today's terms it was shovel ready. So I suppose maybe that took, 5 years. So I arrived in time. The bank was available to do the funding. We amended the plans that were influenced by the Georgian village in Castleknock. Ireland was starting to adopt to a kind of neo-Georgian. The buildings had been torn down in Dublin, in Sam Stevenson and Arthur Gibney and Marion Street. Near the Shelburne, the buildings were being torn down. There was the big protest. So we were starting to I suppose, become aware of Georgian architecture and that it's not something that should be destroyed. So I think I got that wave.
Yeah, and you have a passion for art as well. So was there an overlap along the way? Because you titled some of the streets or buildings, like Rembrandt, for example. That's brilliant.
I suppose in my mind, I always feel that the divine is in the artists first, the poets. And calling them Rembrandts would appear to be a bit cheeky. But he was my favourite artist then. So I felt, at the very least, we'd all get to know a little more about him. And then we had Renoirs and El Grecos. The bungalows were El Grecos, and he had kind of more of a Mediterranean. And Renoir was, I suppose, colour, and Rembrandt more serious. But he would have been regarded as, in some ways, the foremost artist then.
Yeah, funny you're saying that about Renoir. One of my first paintings I ever covered really was Renoir. And I was only a little 17-year-old girl, and it was quite shocking for a lot of the schoolgirls there as well. But also there was something beautiful about what you did, giving such elegance to titles, which was quite innovative in that time. And also on an advertising level, talk to me about how you greeted the buyers as well. There was a little thing happened.
I suppose we dream, and it starts with a dream. And sometimes you find yourself in positions where a little surprised. So you're on the stage. I was, I suppose, maybe 25 then. But it was never on my own, even though my brothers weren't involved directly there. We were doing other things at that time. And I'd been working with Delaney, Mayfair and Pike, great architects. And since then, Jim Pike, and they've had a huge influence in Dublin. And but it was difficult for them to draw Georgian architecture. It was deemed to be, nouveau or pastiche.
Yeah.
So I got a young architect, and I visited him twice a week and sat beside him, and we drew the plans together, or he drew them, and I, instructed and guided. And of course, it's the most effective way in so many ways to work, one-on-one.
Yeah.
Then it can extend beyond that.
And do you think you came at a wave where people are trying to be more sort of progressive with the design and were moving away from the older styles?
Well, you see, in many ways, it wasn't progressive. It was very comfortable and in a sense, familiar.
And beautiful.
You could say that, but there was always a big debate about neo this, neo that, neo the other. But anyhow, people wanted it at the time. We had the options of going to kind of seaside-like, with plans done. And my friend John Flynn went on and did some modern, very modern. But the public didn't like it as much. So you're trying to make sure you sell. You open the show houses, and then the response was, of course, just, what would you say, the first night success.
Yeah.
Great reviews. And we were on our way. And
you had a special way of greeting people where they went through the gates.
Well, I suppose we have, meeting Ernest Ottiwell, you see, being reared down the country, we had heard about champagne, but so we were having fun. And I remember the evening, we had about maybe, I'd say maybe 50 people, but we had 100 bottles of Charles Hyde's. Like Ernest said, don't bring any Guinness, and just champagne for the ladies.
Ooh.
Now, what are the fellas supposed to do? So I had a few, needless to say, bottles of this and that in the back of the boot.
Good for you. And you were setting the tone really as well by doing that on the quality.
Yes, I suppose but you're kind of having fun.
Yeah.
And you suppose Ireland, you have to go back and picture then what it was like.
Yeah.
You know, nice bathrooms. In the earlier days, you see there would be wires down the garden. Now you build walls and you landscaped. That was all kind of coming in the 70s and the early 70s. Maybe some of it in the 60s. But Ireland was coming into a new place, I think.
Yeah. And you progressed from there. And there was one real important area that you were brave as well. It's a completely different style, but Smithfield.
But that's a long time later.
Right. Well, tell me about Smithfield, because to be so brave to go from Georgia Inn to then go to something like designing Smithfield as well, and urbanism as part of that is a real, there's a dichotomy between the two as well, really, isn't there?
But if you think of what allowed Smithfield to happen, there was government policy, you had capital allowances and you had rent allowances. So anyone that bought a unit in Smithfield could offset against their normal income the capital expenditure in Smithfield. The stage was set.
Yeah.
People wanted them. So there was also compulsory purchase because it was part of an area where very old Dublin, the Linders were down there from forever. So John Flynn and myself set about doing it first, and then we met Joe and the Lydens from Galway. So we had to buy, and when I say we, but Joe Linders led all the purchase of the properties. Now it started with John Flynn and I meeting Charlie Duffy, who was a very famous character.
Right.
And at the time he wanted 8 million, not 7.99, not 8.1. So I remember shaking his hand and he said, can we chat about the conditions? And of course we then had the support of, in my terms, the best bank around, Anglo. Without Anglo, it could never have happened.
Brilliant. And for the locals that were already in the buildings prior to all this change, they were also replaced in accommodation as well. There was a good ethical
There was a little bit of
bargaining.
that now. There was, when we went down, there were the soldiers. And who were the soldiers? The soldiers were a group of men who were probably living rough in part. So they got together and they built, I think it was a 3-story building, had it built. And so when we met them, and in particular my brother Christopher, that with them, and we moved them off site and housed them on Leeson Street Bridge. And if you go down there now, there's the soldiers' quarter, or the soldiers. And the idea is they'd be on the streets, keeping an eye on the kids, which they would naturally. And our president then came there and opened it, and it's there to be seen by other people. So it qualified as social housing.
Brilliant.
Integrated into the scheme. No issue at all.
That's one thing you're very supportive of as community as well. And there's very broad reach to the work that you've done, but you've also dropped in to the world of the industrial building as well, which is really important. So the likes of Sandyford, Tala and Belfield. So there's one story I want you to tell me about. You went golfing one day and you met a man on the golf course on his own. Now, you were with your wife at the time on the course, were you?
Yeah, well, what happened is Paris Court had opened and we were all becoming a kind of members, and we had met. And Maureen and I went out to practice a bit because we hadn't played golf for very little. I'd played some, but very little. And Maureen hadn't played. So when we went down, we went on to the first tee, just the two of us. And so there was this chap standing there, a man, I suppose, in his maybe late 50s. So Maureen skilled away. She didn't want to be there.
Escape to the spa, that's it, isn't it, really?
Or maybe. But anyhow, it was gone. So we went around and played. And, you know, you're so interested in chatting and in the property game in Europe. And I asked him, I suppose, maybe in the 15th hole, at that point. And what's the last thing you did? And of course, we chatted about coming to Ireland. He used to come here maybe twice a year with pals and play golf. So he said he'd been the leader in this development in some place in Europe, I can't remember now, but it was 500,000 square feet, which was huge. He came in, we had a coffee, and he sketched it, and then he sent me on the plans. Now, at that stage, we had already permission in Belfield for 160,000 square feet. So I remember going into the architects and we were going to go down. We put in 1,100 cars underneath and went up. So instead of ending up with 160, we ended up with 360. And it's a huge success.
Were they shocked when you came in and said that? Was that like...
Well, probably a little. Yes.
Yeah, it's
And you say,
likely.
is it possible? Because, you know, what was standard then was the buildings that stand above ground, parking would be in front of them. We had done it in Sandyford. So it was more urban than, it was city stroke urban, really.
And it was a brave suggestion going in and changing the plans and then going again as well.
Probably, yeah. But you see, development is always, cities are growing and Dublin should be growing and continues. It is growing, but it should be also, you know, you've only a certain amount of land, a certain amount of public transport, and you need volume.
Yeah.
And the place you achieve it is in density of certainly, say, 8 or 10 floors. Occasionally you have a tower, but that's not where you get the density.
And the foreign influence on that decision as well, just to have that input, because that's a big player for you as well, being abroad and seeing how it works abroad for you.
Well, I suppose you're always, if you think of the advancement that Ireland has made, part of it is you go off on holidays and you're having a look at things and you come back and you chat about them. And we learn by travel, without doubt. Well, I feel strongly that we need to have this foreign influence, but we have to recognise who we are as well. And so when you see things you like, and I have this sense of, I suppose we start using the word like urbanism and placemaking, because that's where you live. People live, simple coffee shops or whatever, the chemists, and it all needs to be at hand. And if you can walk to it, it's ideal.
And it's also lovely that you've been involved with people who are diaspora, or their influence and their investment, and bringing that home is a key thing for you as well.
I met a chap there at Christmas who worked with Apple down in Cork when they came in 1976, Steve Jobs and his pals. The first place was to come to Ireland. And he worked there and it was capitalised then at something like 300 million.
Ooh.
And look at what it is now, 3 trillion.
Amazing.
So imagine being part of that story. And I think the check, we don't know, the check that might have written for the corporate tax a couple of years ago was maybe 8 billion.
Yeah.
So this is allowing us, in a sense, to plan ahead now for the first time.
And also the Burlington Plaza, you can see there that Sky is in and Amazon. Without that, planting those seeds back then, would we have this happening?
Yes. And what had to happen there, which is, because it's a lovely building, in some ways it's my favourite, and Jerry Ryan's team were the architects, but it was renewal within Dublin. There were 4 buildings from memory. We had to assemble all those. We had the ERSI there and we moved them down into the docklands. So you couldn't do it in isolation. It had to be part of renewal. Now, there was no incentives there for that, but we'd have got several permissions. One of them was for a hotel, maybe some residential. And in the end, the moment came when we could build it. It was a joint venture with Allied Irish Investment Managers.
Brilliant.
The Flynns and ourselves. There was 3 parties to it. John Bruder represented Allied Irish Investment Managers.
So you mentioned hotels there as well. Choice? That was another part of
that
this
was
journey?
the idea there was, at the time, was to create, I suppose, living in conjunction with the hotel, creating residential with the hotel, because that works very well in other major cities.
Yeah.
And it's working, I suppose, to some extent with the Ritz-Carlton, or what was the Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons. But that's part of modern city life.
You weren't just driven by that. You also had some beautiful journeys, passionate journeys, and one of those was Tulfaris as well. So talk to me about that, because that wasn't really an investment property. It was...
Well, you see, what, in a sense, I'd say that we all did too much. And at the time, we were investing with the Malahans and McCormick's and Pierce Group down in Carton House. So should we have done Tulfaris? Probably not. But it was a beautiful place. and it needed a lot of investment. So it wasn't a good investment. But it was a very, I suppose, enjoyable investment.
And
And
you need that, don't you?
yeah, I had
Yeah.
it at the time. I remember being down there with Simon and Coon, who was now 20, was just in his arms. And I said, wouldn't it be great to have a place that we could all, have fun with other kids, the usual families. So that was all possible then, but it was also possible then, subject to planning permission, to build these suites that people would buy and that get tax credits. And we failed to get the permission, so values changed.
Okay, so Paddy, one thing I know about you is you're very big into partnerships and trust.
Well, I suppose certainly down the country it was part and parcel of who we were. And, telling lies or anything like was just not the way. So, and without over dramatizing it, but that was a kind of who are you see, is the question. Now, when you try and achieve things, I always remember the first time I met John playing. And it just seemed natural for John and I to go on and do something. We found it so easy. And to think that it wasn't fun, you know, and the joy of, you're chatting and talking, you're dreaming, you're going, when you meet first, you're certainly going out for dinner once a week or you're meeting on the phone for hours. So it's the same in any relationship. Now, I had that, I suppose, with my brothers. And then I bring people to the table, John brings people to the table, and you meet people on the way. So then it becomes possible to achieve things that you can't do on your own. It's impossible. And Maureen always said, you have so much fun with your partners. So it becomes a journey.
Yeah.
And we try to develop the relationships. Like your friend would probably be the lawyer as well, and your architect. So there was always that sense of kind of in this together. But it's never one person. There's never two people. It's a whole team.
Yeah, I can understand that because you came from 6 other brothers, was it?
With seven
Other brothers as well. Oh, there was 7 of you. So
yeah, 8 of us.
8 of you, right. So I came from 6 as well. And I totally understand what you're talking about. I think it's a sense of being part of a community and being part of the collective.
It is, yeah. Well, certainly, and when I see our own children, other parents, the way they're, if you like, living or working or with their own kids now, and the emphasis on sport, and the confidence and the health that comes from it. Like, it's just, like, we were okay, but they're really good at it.
Yeah.
And Pride of Place, we were down in, sure, it's a great place. It wasn't a great place. It is a great place. And everybody has to be proud of where they're from, in a sense. And so you can't do it on your own. Or people that try to, sometimes they get away with it for a while, but the load can be quite heavy. And the load shared, a problem discussed, it's amazing. It could take 10 minutes, it changes the day.
Yeah.
And so I found myself saying this. I'd always remember at a conference with Brian Tracy, and it was maximum achievement. And the idea was, and I remember the takeaway from me was, and he had emphasized, if it is to be, it's up to me. If it's to be, it's up to you and me. And it's up to us.
You should get T-shirts with that on it.
Yes, and it seems a bit, what would you say, blasé or a bit casual. But when you know whether it's someone needs a bit of help, that you're reaching out, because in the first instance it's up to you, up to me, then we can extend it beyond that. So life is a journey that's shared.
And you learned that very early as well. You know, part of your world was on the farm, and then to go to the big smoke, that was a major adjustment for you. Did you bring the sport with you from a very early age?
Yes, I think it was, but I was never particularly good at anything. But you're coming to Dublin, you're playing tennis, you're playing golf. Running, we had the Belfield Bashers, which was a great gang of us running around. We did. I don't know how. I think most of us have moved on, but why did we have fun? Yeah. And in Ellen Park, then Fred Trenneman and others, we went on and won the over 45s. Class 1 tennis, which was a big achievement. I certainly didn't really qualify to be, but it was on the team. But there was a couple of good fellas, John Mulvey, I remember, up front. So you'd always have kind of the stars. But you can't just play a team with stars. The team has to have most hurling or what. There's 15 people. Some of them are strong, some of them are brilliant, but they all make the team.
Yeah.
So I'd have always said, together, TEAM, together, each achieves more. So I'd team together, each achieves more. Now the question is, how do you play together? And kids have to learn. We all have to learn. And of course, if the world could truly trust itself, or mankind could truly, because the animals, I think, nature has kind of put them where they are. But the human has a challenge
Yeah.
to try and share and share our good fortune.
And compromise comes in there as
Oh,
well.
without doubt. I always remember Niall Mellon in particular was a great pal of mine. I was with him last week. And when he got that, I remember we were out with the president and Maureen and I were dancing and things were going well for us. And Niall launched this thing, putting up $1 million. And we said we'd do the same. This is 999. And we did it all. And he has since looked after the building of 36,000 homes. And he's on his way to educate 1 million children in South Africa.
And what is the key to being able to be in a partnership like that?
Well, I'd say my own sense is there's a merging of the heart in a sense. Certainly if you go down, Maureen went down, my son Christopher went down, when you see those little kiddies, and we were those little kiddies, in Ireland we were all disadvantaged. But we've made our way with the help of others to a kind of an elite position now. And when you think the partnership we have with America, like it's amazing. And the surplus we have with the corporate taxes. And so in Ireland today we have 2,650,000 people working, which is amazing. Out of a little over 5 million people. We used to have about one in 3 working. Now we've half the people work. In so many cases, great jobs. Now I know Ireland has gone very expensive, but it's still a great place.
It is.
So it's worth all our while to put our backs to the wheel, to have a vision, to see what Ireland can be. And because we've done it all over the world. And even this week to see what happened in the north of Ireland, sure, it's just pure magic.
Another part of who you are is your love of the world, the community, but not just that. The projects, there's such passion when you do get involved. So is there one in particular, or even two, that you are really proud of that you can say, oh, yeah.
I'd say in so many ways it's Smithfield because there were so many of us involved. And we were all necessary. I mean, Cramptons were the great builders. They're not building now, but they were. I mean, Smithfield, the biggest cheque that was written from memory was in 1 month, I think maybe to Crampton, I think 10 or 12 million. So it was real volume. The speed that it happened and it was a learning for so many people. That was that type of thing happened in other cities, but not so much in Ireland, especially not in Smithfield. But if you go down there now, it's a real city quarter.
Yeah.
And people really like it. Yeah. And there's a cultural merge. And so the more of that happens, the better. And of course, I love the population increasing with foreign nationals, if you like. And I really love it because we went all over the world. I remember reading The Great Hunger when we lost, in a sense, half our population, maybe lost 1 million people through death here. And you say, well, what was all that about? But we planted all these new seeds around the world, and the Irish diaspora now is one of the most powerful in the world. So we're all over the place. And wherever you go, you're going to meet some people from Ireland. And I suppose at some level we're connected.
Yeah. Did you envisage that you would be where you are today with everything?
Well, I don't think I'm in any particularly great place other than that I'm a part of an Ireland now that's alive, very much alive in Ireland, I know in the world as well. And we've all achieved more than we thought we could. And I think if we can plan a little more and look to an Ireland now of 10 million people in the next, 30 years, it'll be so exciting. And then to be able to encourage, in particular young people, and maybe with this newfound wealth, we can put some aside to create these what could be great new companies. our first grandson, James, is working with the support of Enterprise Ireland. And I think that there's a seed that will be sown there and many others that I think will blossom 20 years from now. And so in my mind, I always see that the acorn and I see the oak. And every acorn has that potential to be the oak. And so if we kind of know that, it's then the question, how do we make the steps? And that takes sometimes courage. So Ireland, for the first time in my mind, is in an amazing position now to go forward and plant all those new acorns.
And the youth of Ireland, that's also something that you're very proud of, that you're actually impacting, because you're not just, you've provided places for education, for,
Yes.
that's really important,
Yeah.
especially now.
Well, you see, I think that life, well, my son John would say, and maybe life renews every 20 years, you could say. I know if we look at 6 generations, the average time between the generations is 27 years. But in 20 years, you can change so much, as in young people coming up. And we've all seen young people, and you meet them 10 years later or 5 years later, and to see the growth and the skills they have. So life renews itself. And it's natural for I'm moving on, hopefully, to a decade or two, but the others are coming in. So life is renewing, and you're part of all that, which, of course, for me is just pure joy.
And speaking of joy, you're not just involved with buildings and growth and youth, you also love and have played a major part in the entertainment industry. And I know more
Not really.
recently, you're a patron, isn't that the word they use? And you're an ambassador for Irishness, I suppose. So you were across the waters. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I suppose in my case, I never had we had our little band and that type of thing. But my effort when I go abroad really was kind of the joy of travel, but then doing things. Should we have done as many as we did? Should we build or be part of building a ski slope or a ski? Probably not. But we got it done. Getting involved in the big golf course in America, with lots of other people. And so Canada, we consulted there a lot on properties and enjoyed it immensely. And Canada is a wonderful country. So when you operate in the likes of Canada, they're very good at forward planning. There's no mystery about what you can build. But that's because I think there were essentially people from all over the world going to a new place and doing what they had to do. Whereas here, there's a lot of people stuck in their yesterdays, and change is hard to achieve. Because if you're in the village, nobody wants to see a change. I'm okay. And so that, what do they call it, NIMBYism? So we seem to have huge problem simply planning, and adds expense. And going back to the overseas, of course, when you go overseas, you keep on learning, and you try to bring it all home. And so I'd say travel for people is essential.
And fun also as well.
But if you didn't have,
so important.
Yeah, for sure. Whether it's a new car or a new drink or some food or a new person you meet, sure, isn't that what is the joy of life?
Yeah. And you talked about balance as well, because that's really important.
Yeah, you'd love to think that. And I suppose evidence-based, whether it's health, whether it's a building, whether it's river dance, there's evidence that things that are well done, live on. And it's nice to be part of that. And if you, like your own work, look at the way you're getting the word out. Now, for me, coming here to you and being on that journey, it's a kind of a new journey. Yeah. And it's a new adventure. And of course, unless you fall in love with it, so you have to get lost in the moment, don't you?
Yeah.
And let it be the best, that you be the best you can be. So it's the best that we can be.
You don't always value things that are necessarily monetary based. You have a real sense of family, of compassion, and you've always been driven by that, and also your health. So talk to me about how you do what you do and you still have all this amazing energy.
Well, I suppose, stepping onto the 8th floor, or 8th decade, I remember I was very surprised as a young chap, maybe 15, 14, when my father got sick. And I didn't actually understand it. Now, the doctors didn't know why. Maybe they had a guess. But he had developed as we say, got MS. Now, that was very debilitating.
Debilitating.
Debilitating. Here we're getting there.
Say it one more time. That was
we'll say something else.
that was hard on him.
No, it was very difficult. And I'd say he would surprise my mother. And, 7 brothers, not easy. So then when you say not easy, there was something else to be done then. We had to accept it and get on with it. So that was very important. And then I remember coming on the way to Dublin, I had phoned P.V. Dial and Matt Gallagher and a few others. And meeting Matt, and I spent the whole afternoon with him. And I remember he had uncontrollable hiccups at the time. I remember thinking, why is that? Why does he have that? And I said, God, when I'm his age, because don't forget, I was only 23 now, 24, I'd love to be in good health. And so as we go through life then, how do you maintain good health? Because we're born within reason healthy. And we were well, plenty of nutrition, plenty of exercise. We're down the country. So how do you maintain it? Because you've all the temptations, if you're got very involved or had a tendency to, to drink too much, you pay a price later. But a certain amount of drink is wonderful. Same with food, same with everything. So it's balance in a sense. And I suppose I truly believe, you see, in the whole business of mind, body and spirit. And I'm not so sure if you take any one of them away, what you've got. If you neglect your health, it spills over, and then it spills over. So my own belief is you have no choice but to take care of your body and your mind and your spirit.
So would you have an early morning routine? Because this is something that's been pushed across social media where you get into a certain amount of time doing certain things.
Yeah. Well, I think I've always been an early riser, so my day would generally start about 5. You'd be trying to meditate.
Same here.
You'd be reading, listening to music. And then at about 6, I'd start my physical program. And in particular, John, my son, who's now soon to be 38, he got me going on that. Now, I was always playing golf, tennis, running, marathons, but he, and didn't have to persuade me because I was looking for it. He got me into really simple exercise like bouncing, tummies, stretching, the bell, the bell,
kettlebells.
Kettlebells, yeah. All that, but you can do it all in your own home because I wouldn't go to the gym really.
Yeah.
I might once or twice.
So weight bearing exercises, that kind of thing as well.
I think to say it's very important.
Yeah.
And that you, I know it is, but what's often missed in it though is the mental benefit because it forces you to focus. Yeah. And if you can develop mindfulness, be where you are and be there just now, as you and I are now. So it's great.
And it's so important because you're a great reflection of that as proof, positive.
Well, hopefully so. Well, I think so. I always remember in Christopher's case now, Christopher's our second son, third child, and Christopher, for my 70th birthday, brought in a bicycle into the office and I rode it home. That was 10 years ago. But if I did then, I started cycling quite a bit, cycled around Ireland, cycled in America, and suddenly it becomes your kind of thing and it's a new thing. But of course the benefit, and in particular I think in my case going through the whole NAMA business, this kind of another major adjustment, when you can focus for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, and just be cycling in the beautiful countryside, it's hard to believe that you kind of won't be happy.
Yeah, and you've always had this amazing love for your family, obviously, and that has always been a big player in your life, no matter what went on around you.
Well, you'd love to think that, and it's not just me, but if you're in the old-fashioned way, you were the father of the family or the boss or the something, and then, so if you were a pillar and your wife is there with you, so you're the 2 pillars, and then others come along, and then because we're part of big families, there's compromises. It all has to be part of, but it has to have a dream-like quality. So then when kids going to school, being well educated, all that central, good food. And so if we can do that well, every generation is a new generation and it's a new world, really. So when you change your actions, what you do, and it extends into your family by way of example, and it becomes an energy force, then everybody has the benefit of it.
You know something? That's the best way to finish off this today. Thank you so much,
Oh, well,
Paddy
thank you.
Kelly. You're a legend.
Thank you.